Part 1. The town of Merrow Creek lay nestled deep in a forested valley, cradled by fog-shrouded hills and choked with secrets. It wasn't marked on most modern maps, and locals liked to keep it that way. With cracked sidewalks, sagging porches, and the smell of old pine forever soaked into the air, Merrow Creek looked like a place time had abandoned. Except time hadn't abandoned it. It had just buried its claws in and refused to let go. Every fall, when the leaves turned blood red and the crows screamed like they knew something, the townspeople grew quiet. Porch lights flickered. Children played closer to home. And on the first cold night of October, when the wind howled through the bare trees like a dying breath, the ghost stories began again. It was tradition. In the basement of the old community hall, a place that still smelled of mildew and kerosene, 7 teenagers sat in a circle. The single bulb overhead buzzed faintly, and the shadows it cast made their faces look like masks. At the center of the circle was a rusted lantern, lit with a flickering blue flame that had been passed down for decades. They called it the Whisperlight. "You know the rules," said Marley Vance, the de facto leader. She was 16, tall and wiry, with black nail polish chipped from nervous chewing and a voice made for secrets. 1 story per night. Real stories only. No made-up crap. "Real," echoed the others. "Real," said Drew, adjusting his cracked glasses. "Real," whispered Annabeth, hugging her coat tighter around her even though the basement wasn't cold. "Okay, then." Marley looked around the circle, her eyes lingering on the last person. Simon Locke. New kid. Quiet. Pale as a ghost himself. He didn't flinch under her stare, just nodded once. "Tonight, I'll go first," Marley said, reaching for the lantern. "And I'm not telling just any ghost story. I'm telling the Hollow Girl." Everyone shifted uncomfortably. "Come on," said Drew, voice cracking. "That one's." "She's real," Marley interrupted. "And she's still out there." No one spoke. The lantern sputtered. "She was 12, Marley began, her voice low and steady. "Back in 1963. Her name was Clara Morrow. Her family lived in a farmhouse past Briar Hollow, where the ground's always wet, and the trees grow too close together. One night, she wandered into the woods. They found her 3 days later, standing in a clearing, completely unharmed, but her mouth was sewn shut. Annabeth gasped. Marley ignored her and continued. She never spoke again. Not one word. Her eyes were glassy, like she'd seen something no one else could survive. The doctors said it was shock. Her parents thought she was cursed. And then, a week later, her whole family disappeared. Every last one of them. Except Clara. Drew swallowed. Where was she? "Still standing in that same clearing," Marley whispered. Still silent. Still staring. And when the sheriff tried to take her in, she looked at him, raised her hand, and his heart stopped. The silence that followed was thick, stretched tight like a drum. Clara never aged, never left the woods. People say she lives there still, whispering behind the trees, calling out with no voice, looking for someone to finish what she started. "Finish what?" Simon asked, his voice quiet but steady. Marley leaned forward, eyes sharp. "She's not whole. Something hollowed her out. Something left something behind. And now she needs to pass it on." The lantern dimmed, and from somewhere beyond the walls of the basement, something scratched. Part 2. The scratch was faint, so faint they might have imagined it. A dry, brittle sound, like fingernails on concrete or tree branches brushing a window too slowly. What the hell was that? Annabeth whispered, her eyes wide and shiny. Drew chuckled nervously. "Old pipes. This place is 100 years old." "No, that was outside," said Marley, standing. "Did you lock the back door?" I thought you did," Drew stammered. Everyone turned toward the basement door at the top of the stairs. It was closed, but not latched. It creaked faintly as a draft teased it from behind. Marley climbed the steps and shut it tight. The click of the latch echoed like a gunshot in the silence. "Okay," she said, walking back to the circle. "Probably nothing. But if anyone's trying to mess with us, they better pray I don't catch them." Simon hadn't moved. He sat cross-legged, staring into the Whisperlight's blue flame. "She's real," he said. Everyone turned toward him. "What?" asked Marley. "The hollow girl. Clara Morrow. She's real," Simon said again, not blinking. "How do you know?" Drew asked, raising an eyebrow. Simon slowly looked up, his face pale, eyes almost silver in the cold light. "Because my cousin disappeared near Briar Hollow last year. Just vanished. Cops thought it was a runaway. But I know it wasn't." He left his shoes, his wallet, even his phone with a half-finished video recording. "What did it show?" Marley asked, suddenly serious. Simon's voice dropped to a whisper. "Just trees. And breathing, like he was hiding." Then a girl's face appeared on camera. Eyes too wide, skin too pale, like wax. And she wasn't blinking. Her lips were stitched shut. Annabeth made a choked sound and covered her mouth. "No one believed me," Simon went on. "Not my mom, not the cops. They said I edited it. But I didn't. I couldn't. I smashed the phone after that. Couldn't sleep for weeks." Marley watched him closely, searching his face for a lie. "There wasn't one. That's why I came here," he said. "I found out Clara Morrow was from this town. I thought if I could learn more, maybe I could find out what happened. Maybe stop it." "You don't stop Clara," Marley said darkly. "You survive her. If you're lucky." The Whisperlight flickered again, casting long, twisting shadows on the walls. Simon reached toward it, then stopped. His hand hovered over the glass, as if drawn by something deeper than curiosity. "She wants out," he said. Marley stepped forward. "Don't touch it." But Simon's fingers brushed the lantern. The flame flared bright blue, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Annabeth screamed. Then another sound. Not a scratch this time. A voice. Faint. Garbled. Like it came through a mouth that should not speak. "Here, comes." The basement door slammed open upstairs. Then came footsteps. Heavy, wet, and slow. Part 3. The footsteps creaked across the old wooden floor above, each one deliberate, impossibly loud and wrong. It was a kind of sound that made your skin crawl before your mind even understood why. Like something that had never walked before trying to learn how. Nobody moved. Drew was frozen, his mouth slightly open, his glasses catching the faint glow of the dead lantern. Annabeth was shaking so hard her chair rattled quietly against the floor. Marley was on her feet again, eyes trained on the stairs like she could will them to stay empty. Simon was still sitting. "What did you do?" Marley hissed. "I didn't mean to," he whispered, stunned. She was already here." "No, she wasn't." Marley snapped. "You brought her. That lantern's not just decoration. It's a barrier. It's what keeps the stories from becoming more than stories. You killed the flame." The footsteps stopped. They were right above the stairs. Drew shot to his feet. We should run. Out the window." But before he could finish, the doorknob turned. Just once. Then stopped. No one breathed. Then it started turning the other way. Slowly. Back and forth. Back and forth. Like someone or something was trying to decide if it wanted in. Marley grabbed the Whisperlight and shook it. "Come on," she muttered. "Come on, light again, come on." Nothing. The blue flame was gone, and no matter how she shook or tapped the glass, it stayed gone. "We need salt," she whispered. "Circle of salt, now." "I don't have salt." Annabeth cried. "I do," Simon said suddenly, fumbling in his coat pocket. He pulled out a small plastic bag, half filled with coarse gray grains. "I didn't know if I'd need it, but my grandmother said—" "Good," Marley said, taking it from him. "Everyone sit tight. I'll draw a circle." She worked fast, her hands moving with practiced speed. The salt hissed faintly as it hit the concrete floor, the air seeming to grow colder with every inch she poured. When she was done, the 17s were encircled by a jagged white line. The doorknob stopped turning. Then, boom, something slammed into the door from the other side. It didn't sound like a fist. It sounded like a head. Another boom. Annabeth sobbed. "Stay in the circle," Marley warned, her voice trembling now. "Don't move." The third slam cracked the wood. A splintered groan echoed down the stairs. Then Everything went silent. A long pause. Then, the sound of breathing. But not human breathing. Wet, thick, unnatural, like lungs filled with water. "Guys," Drew whispered, his voice barely audible. There's something in the corner." Marley turned. At the edge of the room, just outside the salt ring, was a shape. Thin, small. A girl. Her eyes were wide open. Her lips were sewn shut. Part 4. Clara Morrow stood no more than 3 feet from the salt line. Her bare feet were filthy, toes curled slightly on the concrete, as if they were feeling the room for something unseen. Her dress, once white, perhaps, was tattered and stained with what looked like mold, dirt, and something darker. But it was her face that held them frozen. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched too tightly over her bones like parchment. Her hair hung in soaked clumps down to her shoulders, dripping water that pooled silently at her feet. And her lips, dark threads sewn in a jagged crosshatch, looked painful, like they'd been ripped through too many times and sewn back again. She tilted her head slowly, curiously, like a bird studying prey that didn't understand it had already been caught. "Don't speak," Marley said quickly, voice low and urgent. "Don't talk to her. Don't listen if she tries to talk to you. She'll try to make you listen." Simon's eyes locked on Clara's. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His entire body trembled, not with fear, but with recognition. "I've seen her before," he whispered. "She was in my dream." "Simon, shut up," Marley hissed. But Clara raised her hand, slowly, pointing a crooked, soaked finger straight at Simon. And then the lights above them, what few dim bulbs remained, exploded. Glass rained down across the salt line, sparking briefly before plunging them into near-total darkness. Only the faint moonlight through the cracked basement windows lit the room now, and it caught Clara's figure in jagged slivers. First her shoulder, then her hand, then her empty, weeping eyes. And then she stepped forward. Her bare foot came down just short of the salt. She bent low, eyes never blinking in blue. The salt scattered. The circle broke. "No!" Marley screamed, grabbing for her bag. "We need to restore it." Clara moved, not walked, glided, silently, almost faster than the eye could follow. She was suddenly inside the circle, standing over Simon, staring into him. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and then she touched his forehead. A crackling burst of blue light surged through him, and he collapsed with a choking gasp, his eyes rolling back. "Simon!" Annabeth shouted, rushing to his side. "Don't touch him!" Marley snapped, dragging her back. But it was too late. Annabeth crossed the line. Clara turned toward her and smiled. The stitches across her mouth began to unravel. Thread snapped. Blood trickled. Skin tore. And the voice that came out was wrong. Too many layers, too many mouths, all whispering at once. One for one. Then she vanished. Just like that. Gone. The room was dead silent, except for Simon's ragged breathing and the drip, drip, drip of something still wet in the corner. Drew broke the silence first. "What the hell does that mean? One for one?" Marley knelt beside Simon, checking his pulse. "She took something," she said, "and left something else. She always does." Annabeth was curled on the floor now, clutching her head, whispering to herself. "I saw something," she murmured. "I saw where she lives." "What?" Drew asked, crouching next to her. I was standing in the woods. But it wasn't right. The trees were moving, breathing, and in the center was a door made of bones. And someone was knocking from the inside. Marley looked at Simon. His eyes were open now, but they weren't his. Part 5. Simon's eyes glowed faintly, catching the flicker of moonlight like twin shards of broken glass. But the color was off. Pale and washed out, the irises stretched too wide, the pupils nothing but pinpricks. He stared straight up, unmoving, unblinking. "Simon," Marley said carefully, "can you hear me?" He sat up slowly, too slowly. His neck cracked with emotion, as if bones inside him were rearranging. When he finally spoke, his voice was layered, his own buried under a second tone, soft and rotting, like breath filtered through damp soil. She opened the gate, he said. No one breathed. What gate? Drew asked, backing away. The one under the hollow, Simon whispered. The door that shouldn't be real. She brought it with her. It's awake now. Annabeth let out a sob. We have to leave. We have to burn this place. No, Simon said too fast. You can't leave. Not yet. Not until the trade is done. What trade? Marley asked, stepping in front of the others protectively. Simon blinked. Once. Twice. When he looked up again, his expression had shifted. Confused. Afraid. What happened? His voice was his again. Why is it so cold in here? You don't remember? Drew asked. Simon shook his head. Marley didn't answer. She was staring at the far wall, the one where the moisture had started to gather. There was writing there now. Long, smeared lines of blackened water, running in thin streams from the ceiling down to the floor. The lines had connected, formed words. One must stay. What the hell does that mean? Drew asked. Marley turned, her voice flat. It means one of us is marked, and if they leave this place tonight, they won't make it past the trees. Annabeth looked ready to bolt. So what, we just stay here? Forever? No, just until we figure out who it is, Marley said, or how to reverse it. Simon stood, still shaky. It's me, isn't it? Marley didn't answer. He stepped closer. It has to be. I touched the lantern. I broke the flame. That's not how Clara works, Marley said. She chooses. It's not about guilt, it's about imbalance. When a story is disturbed, it creates a wound. Clara fills it with something else. Something else? Drew asked. Marley turned slowly toward the basement window. Outside, the trees were moving, not with the wind, with purpose. Branches clawed at the glass, gently, rhythmic, beckoning. Then a second figure appeared. Not Clara, taller, heavier. Its face was a mass of white eyes and twisted bark. Like the forest itself had grown something it wanted to be seen. Annabeth screamed. The thing reached toward the window and tapped. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Drew ran to the salt bag and dumped what little remained around the lantern again. Marley, what do we do now? We finished the story, Marley said grimly. That's the only way to seal the breach. If the story ends, the gate closes. That's the rule. Then tell it, Simon said, voice rising. Marley knelt, relit the lantern. It sputtered, then caught barely. Its blue glowed dim and sickly. She took a breath. Clara Morrow returned from the hollow, she said slowly. But she wasn't alone, and what followed her wears 100 names. The lantern hissed. Outside, the forest moaned, and the basement door creaked open. Part 6. The door swung open without sound this time. No slam, no rush of wind, just a slow, silent arc as if inviting them upward. Beyond it, the stairwell gaped like a throat, swallowing the hallway in darkness. But there was something standing just inside the threshold, not moving, not breathing, watching, a figure draped in burlap, its head twisted at an impossible angle, long strands of wet hair clinging to its shoulders. Around its neck, a rusted bell hung on a rotted cord. It didn't ring. Not yet. Drew stepped back, gripping a broken chair leg like a bat. Tell me that's not Clara. It's not, Marley whispered. That's the thing she brings when someone lies to her. Simon's jaw tightened. Lies? What do you mean? You didn't smash your cousin's phone, did you? Marley said suddenly, turning to him. You didn't just see her on that screen. You heard her. Simon's face went pale. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell all of it. The bell figure took one slow step into the basement. The bell swung, but still no sound. She spoke to you, Marley said, even with her mouth sewn shut. You heard her words. Simon backed toward the far wall. I thought it was a dream. She told me something. Told me I'd understand later. And now you do, Marley said, because you're the one she chose. The figure raised one long, gnarled arm. The bell tilted. Still no sound. But Drew screamed. He dropped the chair leg and collapsed to his knees, clutching his head like something had burrowed into it. "She's in my ears," he shrieked. "She's whispering inside me." Annabeth rushed toward him, but the air grew suddenly cold. So cold the floor beneath her frosted over. Her breath came out in clouds. Her step slowed. The bell figure took another step, and the bell rang. Just once. A deep, low toll like a dying church. It echoed not in the ears, but in the bones. Drew's scream cut off mid-breath. He fell forward, limp. Still, Marley ran to him, but it was too late. His eyes were open, blank, hollow. The bell figure stopped moving. Its job was done. Annabeth let out a sob and clung to Marley. He wasn't the one. It wasn't his fault. "No," Marley said, her voice low, but he crossed the salt. He tried to lie to the story. "Clara doesn't allow that." Simon stood shaking. "So I'm marked." "No," Marley said slowly, looking down at the dead boy. "She tricked us." The trade was made the second the light went out. Drew stepped over the line when the story was still open. That sealed his fate. Simon shook his head. "So it's over?" Marley looked toward the door. The bell figure was gone, but where it had stood, something was left behind. A book. Old. Leather-bound. Soaked. Marley picked it up, hands trembling. The title burned across the front in flaking gold. Ghost Stories, Volume 9. She opened the cover. Inside, written in fresh ink, Story 1, The Hollow Girl, told by Marley Vance. Survivors. 3. Costs 1 soul. Her fingers trembled as she turned the page. Blank. Waiting. Part 7. The silence in the basement was unbearable. No one spoke. Drew's body lay still, his glasses shattered beside his hand, mouth open in a final, frozen gasp. The lantern's blue flame flickered weakly, casting shadows on the pages of the book Marley now held like it might burn her if she squeezed too tightly. Annabeth knelt beside her, still shaking, tears streaking down her cheeks. Simon didn't move. He just stared at the book, his expression unreadable. Marley turned another page. Still blank. "I don't understand," Annabeth whispered. "Is it over? Is the story really done?" Marley looked at the title page again, reading the words aloud as if doing so would make them false. Survivors, 3. Her eyes flicked to Simon, then to Annabeth, then to herself. 3. "It means for now," Marley said. "The story's closed. The gate is sealed. But the book, it's waiting. It wants more." Simon stepped closer. "It's like a journal?" "No," Marley said. "It's a record, a ledger. Every time someone lights the Whisperlight and tells a story, a new chapter begins." Annabeth looked horrified. "So, what happens if we tell another one?" "The book fills it in," Marley said, shutting it with sharp snap. "And the rules come to life." Simon ran his fingers through his hair, pacing. "So all the ghost stories we've been telling every year, every October, this thing has been writing them down, making them real. Only the true ones," Marley said. "Only the ones that have roots, that connect to whatever lives past the veil." Annabeth sat back against the wall, hugging her knees. "We're cursed." Marley stood up slowly. "No, we're keepers, whether we want to be or not." Simon looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" She walked to the lantern and lifted it carefully. The flame inside steadied in her hands. "When my brother disappeared, I searched for answers," she said. "He vanished during one of these story nights. No one remembered what story he told. The next day, he was gone. The only thing I found was this lantern, still lit, sitting on his bed." Simon stared. "That's why you're the one who leads it every year." Marley nodded. "I thought if I kept the stories contained, if I kept the rules, maybe I'd understand what happened to him. Maybe I could find a way to bring him back." Annabeth looked up. "And now—" Marley set the lantern back down gently. "Now I know the truth. The book can't be destroyed, but it can be closed, as long as the story is told fully and paid for." She picked up the book again and tucked it under her arm. "We need to keep it from falling into the wrong hands." Anyone who doesn't understand rules. They'll unleash things far worse than Clara. Simon looked toward the stairs. So what do we do now? Marley looked at Drew one last time, then toward the door. We bury him, deep, and we seal this basement. Annabeth's voice was a whisper. And the book. Marley looked at them both, then down at the crack cover. We lock it away. And we pray no one ever tries to tell another story. But far beyond Merrow Creek, on a lonely back road surrounded by dying pines, a rusted pickup truck slowed to a stop. A man climbed out, middle-aged, thin, with a hollow look in his eyes. He walked to the edge of the woods and knelt before an old stone, half swallowed by moss. He pulled something from his coat. A book, not leather-bound. Wooden, older. He opened it. Blank pages. He whispered, "Let me tell you about the man with no teeth." And somewhere the Whisperlight flickered. Part 8. The wind rustled the trees along the roadside, but not with the sound of leaves. It was something else, drier, scratchier, like parchment being torn. The man didn't flinch. He just kept reading from the blank book in his lap. Even though no words appeared on the page, he didn't need them. He already knew the story by heart. The man with no teeth lived at the bottom of Old Needle Hill, he murmured. Not in a house. In a hole. Dug it with his hands. Said he was born in the earth, and one day the earth would call him back. He smiled, exposing teeth that weren't teeth at all. Shards of bone, wedged in too tightly, stained red at the roots. He didn't eat food, the man continued. He ate voices, screamed into jars, sealed with wax. And when he had enough, he'd trade them. The book's page darkened slightly, as though ink were beginning to bleed up from underneath. Back in Merrow Creek, Marley jolted awake in bed, heart hammering in her chest. It was 3 a.m. The air was too still, too quiet. She turned toward her nightstand. The Whisperlight sat there, still lit, still blue. That shouldn't have been possible. She hadn't lit it since the night in the basement. "Annabeth?" She whispered into the silence, reaching for a phone. No service. She climbed out of bed and crossed the room, pausing at the window. The street outside was empty, but someone had written something on her window in foggy breath. "He's hungry." She stepped back. Her phone buzzed violently in her hand. Unknown number. One new voicemail. She played it. The first thing she heard was breathing. The second was a voice, low, gravelly, impossibly close. "Tell the story, or I'll take the teeth." The line went dead. 2 towns over, Simon stood outside his aunt's house, smoking nervously under the porch light. He hadn't slept since the basement. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Clara whispering in reverse, saw Drew's eyes go blank, saw the bell swinging, and worse, the book. He thought about it every hour. What else could be inside it? What else had been told and forgotten? Then, without warning, his hand moved on its own. Into his coat pocket, he pulled out a folded piece of paper. Not torn from a notebook, but from the book. From ghost stories. He hadn't remembered taking it, but it was there, smooth, yellowed, and blank. Until now, ink swirled across the page, forming words in a language he didn't recognize, then settling into English. Story 2, The Man with No Teeth. Teller, unknown. Location, spreading. Below that, a single instruction, witness required. Simon's phone buzzed. A new text. From Marley. Don't open anything. Not your door. Not your window. Not your mouth. Not tonight. The porch light flickered, and from the woods nearby, a knock. Part 9. The knock came again. Once. Twice. A third time. Slow, deliberate, and wet. Simon froze. His breath clouded the air even though it was midsummer. A thick chill seeped from the darkness just beyond the porch, carrying with a coppery tang that made him gag. He fumbled for the doorknob, suddenly unsure if he was locking it or unlocking it. The woods didn't move. They watched. Another text buzzed from Marley. "Simon, do not speak to him. That's how he enters. Silence is survival." Simon backed away from the front door, hands trembling. That's when he saw it. On the front steps, right beneath the porch light. A jar. Small. Glass, sealed with black wax. Inside, something moved. Simon stepped closer. Slowly, the jar pulsed, not like something alive inside it, but like a sound was pressing outward, something trying to scream its way out. And scrawled across the lid in old ink, Voice number 14, return for trade. Simon stumbled back. Another knock, but this time on the back door. He spun around, heart pounding, running to the kitchen, just in time to see the shape through the curtain. Tall, thin, its face nothing but a mouth. No eyes, no nose, just teeth, rows and rows of jagged, chipped yellow teeth, all clattering and clicking even when the figure was still. Simon backed away slowly, and then his phone buzzed again. But this time no text, a voice memo from an unknown number. He played it, and his own voice whispered from the speaker. I told the story. He's here for me, but I gave him someone else's name. Simon dropped the phone. Behind him, the front door began to creak open. Not slammed, not burst, just opened, quietly, like someone already had a key. And from the threshold, the man with no teeth smiled, his single gaping maw glistening. He didn't enter. Not yet, because he didn't need to. Simon had already heard him, and in the world of stories, that was enough. Elsewhere, Marley was in her attic. She poured a salt ring around the Whisperlight, the book and herself. Candles flickered. Pages fluttered. She opened the book again. Story 2, The Man with No Teeth. Status, open. Witness, confirmed. Her hands trembled as she saw what came next. Cost, variable. Trade accepted. One name. Name given, Marley Vance. No, she whispered. No, no, no. And in the reflection of the lantern glass, a shape appeared behind her, grinning, waiting. Part 10. Marley spun around, heart hammering, but the attic was empty. Only shadows and the faint scent of damp earth lingered in the stale air. The lantern's blue flame flickered violently, casting dancing shapes on the wooden beams overhead. She swallowed hard, steadying herself. No, she muttered again. This can't be happening. Her fingers trembled as she traced the words in the book. Name given, Marley Vance. Her own name, scrawled in ink that pulsed like a heartbeat beneath her touch. A cold breeze whispered through the cracked window. The pages of the book fluttered as if caught in a silent storm, revealing a new entry. Story 3, The Whispering Bell. Status, pending. Witness, unknown. Marley's breath caught. She remembered the bell figure in the basement, the one that had taken Drew. She closed the book abruptly, clutching it like a lifeline. Her mind raced. If Simon was marked by the hollow girl, if she herself was a trade for man with no teeth, then the whispering bell was next. A dreadful certainty settled in her chest. Suddenly, the attic door creaked open. Slow, deliberate, Marley's eyes darted toward the shadowed entrance. A figure stepped in. Tall, silent, its face obscured by darkness, but she could feel its eyes burning into her soul. The rusted bell around its neck tinkled faintly. Marley backed against the wall, clutching the book. The figure raised one gnarled hand, pointing at her. A voice echoed, soft, layered, impossible. One story ends. Another begins. Marley's scream caught in her throat. Outside, the wind howled, and the Whisperlight guttered. Part 11. The blue flame sputtered, casting a flickering halo of cold light around the cramped attic. Marley's chest rose and fell in ragged gasps as the bell figure advanced. Each step resonated with a hollow toll that seemed to echo inside her skull. Please, Marley whispered, clutching the book like a shield. There has to be a way to stop this. The bell swung once, slow and deliberate. The air thickened, choking and damp. Suddenly, the attic walls seemed to breathe, pulsating like the inside of some monstrous beast. Shadows stretched and twisted, crawling across the wooden beams, filling the room with writhing shapes. Marley's eyes darted to the pages of the book, which had sprung open to a new passage she hadn't seen before. The only way to end the cycle is to tell the final story, the story that binds all others. but the teller must be willing to pay the ultimate cost. The bell figure stopped, lifting its head slowly. Its face, one void of shadow, now shimmered with faint, ghostly outlines of past victims, eyes, mouths, and faces bleeding into one another like a cursed tapestry. Marley felt a cold hand grip her ankle. She looked down to see a spectral hand emerging from the floor, fingers clawing like desperate roots. Her heart hammered. She had a choice: tell the final story and pay the price, or be claimed and let the stories consume the world. The Whisperlight flickered once more, fighting for life. Marley closed her eyes. Her voice was steady, even as her hands shook. I will tell the story. The bell toll rang out, louder now, reverberating through the attic and into the night beyond. And as Marley began, a heavy silence fell, a silence that waited for the end. Part 12. Marley's voice broke the silence, soft at first, then growing stronger with each word she spoke. She told the story she'd heard since childhood, the one whispered by her family around dying fires, passed down like a warning. The beginning wasn't with Clara, she said. It started long before, with the first storyteller who dared to open the veil. Her hands trembled as she recited every detail: the shadowed forest, the sealed gate beneath the hollow, the pact made between man and spirit. The bell figure listened, motionless except for the slow, steady swing of its bell. With every word, the air grew colder, the shadows deeper. Simon's face appeared in Marley's mind, his eyes glassy and lost. Drew's silent scream, Annabeth's tears. She spoke of the lantern, the salt, the rules, and then the price. For every story told, Marley whispered, a soul must pay, and only when the final tale is told with the gate closed forever. She paused, gathering strength. This is the story of the last trade, the one that ends all trades. The lantern flared, casting brilliant blue light that filled the attic and pushed back the creeping shadows. The bell tolled once, twice, and then a deep, shuddering sigh seemed to ripple through the very bones of the house. The bell figure stepped back. The spectral hands retreated. The walls stopped breathing. And Marley felt it, a weight lifting, a darkness receding. The book snapped shut. The Whisperlight burned steady. Outside, the first rays of dawn touched the horizon. Marley sank to her knees, exhausted but victorious. The stories had ended, or so she hoped. Part 13. The sun's pale light spilled through the attic window, bathing Marley's trembling form in gold. The heavy silence was replaced by the gentle chorus of morning birds, as if the world was exhaling after a long, held breath. She closed her eyes and let the warmth seep into her bones, but deep inside, a cold not refused to loosen. The stories were silent, for now, but the price had been paid. Her hands still tingled from the story's weight, and in the back of her mind, a whisper lingered. One story ends. Another begins. Marley stood, clutching the Whisperlight close. The leather-bound book lay closed beside her, but she knew it wasn't finished. It never would be. In the quiet that followed, she made a decision. She would guard the stories, keep them safe, keep the gate closed. Because if the stories ever leaked again, if the lantern ever died, then the world would remember the hollow girl, the man with no teeth, the whispering bell, and the cost would be far, far worse. She descended the attic stairs slowly, each creak a reminder of the fragile peace. At the bottom, Annabeth and Simon waited, eyes wide with questions that words couldn't yet form. Marley smiled faintly, exhaustion etched deep into her face. "Let's go home," she said. Outside, the trees stood still, for now, but somewhere, deep beneath the earth, a door waited, waiting for the next story. Part 14. Weeks passed, but the quiet in Merrow Creek felt heavier than ever. The once vibrant leaves now fell in slow, mournful spirals, blanketing the cracked sidewalks like forgotten memories. The townspeople whispered more cautiously, casting sideways glances at the woods that bordered the town, a boundary no one dared cross after dusk. Marley kept the Whisperlight hidden beneath her bed, its faint blue glow pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The book remained locked away in a metal chest in her closet, chained and sealed with salt crystals. Still, Every night she dreamed of stitched lips and teeth that clicked like dying clocks. One evening, Simon came to her doorstep, pale and jittery. "I found something," he said, holding out a crumpled scrap of paper. It was hidden in the town archives. Marley took it carefully, smoothing the fragile parchment. The faded ink read, "The final storyteller must sacrifice what they love most. Only then will the gate be sealed for eternity." Her throat tightened. "I thought it was over," she whispered. Simon shook his head. "It's never over." They looked out the window, where the first stars blinked against the deepening sky. Somewhere, in the shadows between the trees, a faint knock echoed. Part 15. The knock was gentle at first, like a hesitant visitor unsure of its welcome. Then it grew louder, more insistent. 3 slow beats against the weathered wood of Marley's front door. She and Simon exchanged a glance, the weight of unspoken fears pressing between them. Marley moved cautiously toward the door, every step heavy with dread. Simon followed, clutching the scrap of paper like a talisman. Outside, the porch light flickered, struggling against the gathering darkness. Marley's hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. Before she could grasp it, a voice whispered through the cracked open door, cold and dry as dead leaves. "Are you ready to pay the price?" The air shifted, thickening with the scent of damp earth and old sorrow. Simon swallowed hard. "Who's there?" No answer. Only the faint sound of bell rusted, slow and mournful. Marley took a deep breath and stepped outside. The trees loomed around her like silent sentinels, their branches twisted into shapes that seemed to watch, waiting. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Not the hollow girl, not the man with no teeth, but something older, a woman cloaked in tattered gray, her eyes hollow pools that reflected every fear Marley had ever held. The bell around her neck tinkled softly as she reached out a hand. "Your story isn't finished," she said. "And neither is mine," Marley replied. The night swallowed them both, and the woods whispered once more. Part 16. Darkness wrapped around Marley and the cloaked woman like a suffocating shroud. The forest held its breath. Even the wind seemed to hush in reverence or fear. The woman's eyes glowed faintly, reflecting an ancient sorrow and a simmering power that Marley could barely comprehend. "Who are you?" Marley demanded, struggling to keep her voice steady. The woman smiled, a sad, knowing curve of lips that had seen centuries pass like days. "I am the keeper before the keeper," she said softly. "The first to bear the burden of stories. The first to pay the price." Marley swallowed hard. "Then what happens now?" The keeper reached out, tracing a finger down Marley's cheek, cold as a grave. "You must choose. Sacrifice what you love most to seal the gate forever, or the stories will never end." Marley's mind raced. The lantern, the book, her friends, her brother, lost the stories so many years ago. "I don't want to lose anyone else," she whispered. The keeper nodded. "Then the cost is yours." Marley closed her eyes, feeling the weight of generations settle on her shoulders. The bell chimed softly, as if marking the moment. "I accept," she said. A sudden wind whipped through the trees, scattering leaves and whispers alike. The gate beneath the hollow sealed with a final, resounding click. The lantern flared bright blue, then burned steady, pure. Marley opened her eyes. The keeper was gone. In her place, only silence, and the faintest hint of a smile. Part 17. Marley stood alone beneath the ancient oaks, the first rays of dawn filtering through the dense canopy. The air felt lighter, less suffocating, as if a great weight had been lifted. The forest, once restless and watchful, now seemed at peace. She clutched the Whisperlight tightly, its blue glow steady and warm against her palm. The book remained sealed, its pages resting silently within the chest in her home. She knew the stories were not gone forever. They never would be, but now at least they were contained. As she turned to leave the hollow, a soft rustling caught her attention. From behind a gnarled root, a small figure emerged. A girl, pale and soaked, with eyes wide and lips stitched shut. Clara Morrow, but this time there was no fear in her gaze. Instead, she smiled faintly. "Thank you," she whispered. Marley nodded, understanding at last. The stories were not curses. They were warnings. And now, the tale was hers to guard. She stepped away from the hollow, the morning light washing over her like a promise. Behind her, the woods stood silent. For now, Part 18. Days melted into weeks, and life in Merrill Creek slowly returned to a fragile normal. The whispers in town faded, replaced by the hum of everyday routines. Kids playing in the streets, neighbors chatting over fences, the occasional dog barking in the distance. But Marley knew the truth was never that simple. One evening, as twilight settled into a deep violet, she sat on her porch, the Whisperlight resting on the table beside her. Its soft blue glow was comforting, a beacon against the creeping shadows. Simon joined her, holding a small jar filled with salt crystals. He placed it next to the lantern. "Are you sure it's over?" he asked quietly. Marley looked up at the darkening sky. Stories never really end. They just wait for the next listener, the next teller. Simon nodded. "So we keep watching, keep guarding." Marley smiled faintly. "Exactly." Suddenly, a chill swept through the air, and the porch light flickered. From the edge of the woods, a faint silhouette appeared, a figure cloaked in gray, bell tinkling softly. Marley's eyes narrowed. "It's a warning," she said. The stories will return. Simon tightened his grip on the jar. Together, they watched the figure disappear into the night. Because the stories never die. They only wait in the dark. Part 19. The weeks that followed were restless. Merrill Creek felt like a town caught between two worlds, the waking and the whispered. The woods, once quiet and still, seemed alive with subtle movements, fleeting shadows darting just beyond sight. Marley and Simon kept vigil, taking turns watching the house and surrounding land, guarding the Whisperlight and the locked book. The salt circles grew thicker, candles burned longer, and their nerves frayed with every creak and whisper of the night. One evening, as a storm rumbled in the distance, Marley found a new page tucked beneath the book's cover, written in a hurried, trembling hand. "The story is not finished. The gate is open again. The keeper has fallen." Her blood ran cold. Simon reached for her hand, steady and reassuring. "We have to go back," Marley said, "to the hollow, to the stories." And as lightning split the sky, they prepared to face what had returned. Because some stories never truly end, they only change chapters. Part 20. The hollow awaited them like a wound in the earth, dark and pulsing with unseen energy. The trees whispered secrets as Marley and Simon stepped beneath the heavy canopy, the soil soft and damp beneath their boots. The air grew colder with every step, thickening until it felt like breathing through wet cloth. At the center, the ancient door stood, carved from bone and shadow, faintly glowing with blue runes. Marley pulled the Whisperlight from her pack, its flame steady and bright. "We have one chance," she said. "One final story." Simon nodded, pulling a tattered notebook from his coat. Together, they began to speak, weaving words and memories, fears and hopes, telling the story of the town, of the lost, of the keepers who came before. The door trembled, the ground shook, the gate began to close. But as a final word left their lips, a shadow lunged from the darkness, a shape twisting and snarling, claws scraping bone. Marley stepped forward, holding the lantern high. The blue flame burned fiercely, cutting through the darkness. The creature recoiled, howling as it was drawn back into the void. The gate sealed with a thunderous click. Silence returned. For now, Marley and Simon stood together, breathless but victorious. They had told the last story. But deep inside, Marley knew the stories would always find a way.